Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast. Well, Julianne, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited. As I told you earlier, our coffee convo a couple weeks ago had me very inspired. We talked about a lot of things, but I am very curious to start with your career journey and your background and everything that you do. And then, of course, we'll tie it in to you being a mom and just being a badass as a whole. But let's start there. Like, when did you start your company? Share a little bit about your company and how you got into the industry.
Yeah, so I'm actually from Western Canada originally, and I moved to New York probably 11 years ago to attend FIT. So that was sort of my like foray into the Big Apple and my introduction to the city. And so right after I graduated, there was like a guy who was guest lecturing in one of my classes, and he was mentioning there was an opportunity for a social media coordinator, which nowadays that's like such a common job, but Instagram had just launched around that time, and so people weren't paying attention to social media. Nobody cared. It wasn't part of marketing strategies, and so that was my first role at Ian Schrager Hotels, Edition Hotels in Public, the same sort of group. And it was such an amazing opportunity to really like fly under the radar, and nobody was paying attention to what I was doing, but kind of test and learn and start to build, organic relationships with influencers at the time. So, the Kiara Fragnes of the world, or Mariana Hewitt, or Chriselle Lim, all of them were coming to New York, and we were doing these exchanges for hotel rooms at the time. And so that's sort of where it all began. And because the industry obviously took off, my career really like catapulted quickly, and, took a number of different roles, both on brand side and agency. But it came to a point 6 years ago where I just was realizing the influencer marketing world was so, oversaturated. I call it the wild, wild west. There were so many different approaches, and I felt like there was an opportunity to really kind of like break through the noise and do something different. So I launched my company Dialogue 6 years ago. I was just myself.
Wow.
And as a marketer, I think you put so much pressure to launch a brand in such a robust way. But I did the complete opposite to that. I had no website. I had no social presence.
Wow.
I was just a one-man show. And I just went off of my reputation and relationships in the industry to get my first couple of clients, and thought, let's give this a go, commit to 6-month contracts. And the rest is history. We're now, we've grown to a team of 10. We're based in Williamsburg, and we've worked with a lot of really amazing clients over the years. So
wow,
growth happened organically.
Yeah, you mentioned that you wanted to take a different approach to it and kind of break through the noise. Why did you want to specifically focus on influencer marketing versus maybe other aspects of social media? And we both know, it's expanded so much beyond influencer marketing. It's also so much like social media strategy and like aesthetics and like all these different things that honestly I'm sure it takes a whole team to very much do. But why focus specifically on influencer marketing during that time?
Well, I think a little bit of, it's funny, I'm reading a book right now, and of course I'm forgetting the title of it, but I like was devouring it last night. And there was a chapter in it that says like so much of your life is about dumb luck. And there's so much that you can do strategically and like really like, focus on building your career. But I happened to fall into this world of social media early on. I happened to get an expertise in influencer marketing. So it definitely wasn't calculated.
Totally.
I think my expertise and knowledge grew quickly in a time where nobody knew anything about influencer marketing.
Right.
So
that's true.
I think you pointed out a really great point, though. When starting my company, I have always been really hyper niche and just offering influence marketing. My background has been in performance marketing and social media marketing and content creation, digital PR. But I realized, there was just a really specific need for brands to understand how to approach building a really authentic community of influencers and creators. And that was it happened to be my expertise. So I would say it's kind of serendipitous in a way, but also I just had a feeling in my gut that I feel like in life, windows of opportunities open, and they're not huge doors. They're just small little windows, and you can miss them if you don't, jump on the opportunity.
Right.
But I just saw this small window of opportunity where I thought, okay, I can do this better and more efficiently, more meaningfully. And so I went for it.
Yeah. How long did it take you to grow your team? You said it's now a team of 10?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 6 years, and I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, like I was so focused on just getting the work done. So one of my first clients was an old boss of mine. She was the VP of marketing at Shiseido. And so Shiseido, being a huge, huge, huge beauty brand, was my first client. Worked with them for 3.5 years.
Wow.
And that just, built at least a base when I started.
Yeah.
And then, I think the next big opportunity came with Sakara Life. And that was, again, a referral of someone in my network. And Sakara Life opened up the doors to Daily Harvest, and Daily Harvest opened up the doors to Seed Probiotics and Brooklinen and Our Place and all of these, clients, and our roster started to mount and get, larger and larger and sort of more exciting. But it very much happened step by step. So similarly, my company grew in the same way. It was just me for, say, the first 8 months. I hired one employee. And I think it wasn't until about 3 years ago, so 3 years into starting Dialogue, where I started working with a business coach that completely kind of broke open my limiting beliefs, or broke down my limiting beliefs. And that led me to really an extreme amount of growth quickly.
Right. What was because we talked about that on our coffee date, if you will. And I remember you mentioned that this coach helped you significantly with breaking through those limiting beliefs. I'm curious, was one of them ever the fear of going from one woman show to now paying employees full time, how that looks for how much you get to take home? You know what I mean? Because I could totally see that that's often a battle from, solo entrepreneur into growing a team.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel I wasn't necessarily as concerned with growing my team because it was calculated in consulting as opposed to launching a startup. There's a set amount of revenue, there's contracts in place, you know what you're going to be receiving, and you know what you can invest in. I think where the major limiting beliefs were, no one could ever manage my client meetings except for me. Nobody could ever do my 60-page strategy decks except for me. That's only something I can do as a consultant. I'm never going to be able to. I was living in Paris at the time and working New York hours. So I was working till like 1 a.m. because clients are going to drop me if I all of a sudden am choosing my own hours. So all of these, like this noise, and slowly working with Ben, I started to dismantle all of these beliefs where absolutely you can find someone who can run your client meetings far better than I am. And my team as a unit produces far better strategies than I ever did by myself. And setting boundaries to say that I want to do all my meetings in the morning Eastern time is not a big deal. So, slowly starting to unravel that really helped me grow, because it allowed me to like empower and delegate a lot of the work and trust others to do it. And so that's where you grow. If you get stuck in the idea that only you can do it, you'll never, scale.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your team as a unit ended up being able to have these meetings and have very similar strategies. And I think you alluded to that in a coffee conversation too, which is almost kind of learning from your approaches and then applying that themselves. How did you teach that to them in a way that enabled them to take that into their own approach versus almost like hand holding the whole way?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just chatting with someone over coffee this morning about hiring, and I think there's 2 ways to go about it. I was, a small company, so I was hiring more junior level team members and spending, years of mentorship and training. It's not something that like, people say, well, how did you do it? You now have a team that is really, really running the show, and they're doing incredible work without me really being involved in the day to day. That didn't happen overnight. And there's 2 ways you can think about hiring. You can hire someone really senior who has that skill set that can come in automatically. But I, really identified individuals that were values aligned with our values at Dialogue, that had the hunger and excitement in them to learn, and were passionate about what we do and really loved our industry.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like standardized it in the sense where we had training, every Friday afternoon was client management training. And it's not necessarily the hard skills, it's the soft skills of reading someone's personality, adapting to a client's needs. Is someone have a huge ego? Is someone really insecure? Is someone getting a ton of pressure from their CEO internally?
Right.
Is someone really burnt out and not enjoying their job? And recognizing that in a client and then adapting the way we provide our services. So it sounds really frivolous to like train a team member, but that's actually what leads to our client retention and our connection with our clients and our relationships, because we can recognize what they need and we adapt our services, our strategies, our approach for them. And so it's that soft skills of negotiating, client management, recognizing red flags, just like the kind of EQ, which I actually did like standardized training for my team around that.
Yeah. And so did you feel like originally, because I could imagine myself very similar, especially when it comes to like my podcast and my entrepreneurship life, I think there's a lot of that mentality too, where maybe I'm the only one that has that EQ level to understand that. So I need to be the one speaking to, the head of the whatever. Right. And so that's kind of fascinating to hear that from you, like learning to break through from that belief, like that I'm the only one that can connect with the client like this, because this person might not have the skill set yet.
And the amount of times I'd roll my eyes and be like, no, like you just don't really understand. Like I'm the only one that can like really host that meeting. I know. And he would just say, okay, fine, Julianne. And time after time I'd come back and he'd be like, amazing. So you found, this team member who, and it's not even about necessarily training someone, but it's identifying people that's their zone of genius. That's what they love to do. You can't force someone to host meetings and be really in that social perspective. That's not their zone of genius. So I think it's identifying people in what they love doing and what fires them up, and then giving them the skill set. So it's kind of that combination. But that's truly, for me, the way not only to grow. I think there's a lot of like admiration around growth and success of a business, which I aspire to, but also even more so, it allows you to have freedom in your life. If you can empower others to do what they love to do and get like a team really working together to produce it, it frees you up from, having to be on every single call, having to control every single strategy, burning the midnight oil. I feel like that like hustle and grind narrative of I have to do it all. It's just a story you're telling yourself. You don't have to do it all, and you don't have to burn yourself out in New York City. That's actually not the case for everyone. No,
I agree. And I think that resonates with a lot of young women listening to this who are maybe freelancers right now, or maybe starting something small as well, is learning, like I think after that solopreneur years, right? Like you experience, at some point you reach a glass ceiling and a threshold of, okay, I cannot grow this unless I outsource XYZ. And it's kind of the question of, how do I break through that limiting belief of, okay, I don't know if I can because financial reasons, or the controlling aspect, right? I mean, I think a lot of people face that, but they don't often hear about like maybe the process of how you break through that.
And again, like that is all very real. So Dialogue and the success of our company has been solely referral basis. That's the only way we've ever gotten clients. Close to 100 clients in 6 years. So it is the value of our reputation and quality work is everything to me. I have such high expectations that we never falter with the quality of work that we do. But it's not necessarily in saying that you can like offload it. It's just knowing that you can find people that actually will do it better. And they might be junior and you might think, well, they don't have my expertise, but there's so much that you bring as an individual. But when I get into a conference room with my team, sometimes the best, most creative ideas come from our intern who's still in school, who works for us hourly. And it's not this, I think sometimes New York can tell this narrative of like hierarchy and pay your dues, but it's a matter of just letting everyone do what they do best and live in their zone of genius and collaboratively, produce the work. So
How did you handle, let's say, times when you and a client parted ways?
Mhm.
I think this one is definitely a question that a lot of freelancers and those who start their
Yeah.
own client service-based business often struggle with as well, right? And
Yeah.
and I think that's something, once again, not many people talk about as much because it's on the less sexy side
Yeah.
of business, right?
Well, I think so many things I've learned over the years. First of all, at the beginning, I took any and every client that would take me.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
was like so excited just to have the
Yeah.
revenue come in.
Yeah.
And I completely took on the wrong clients that were not meeting our specific skill set, or they weren't ready for our strategy.
Right.
So it's taken
Right.
me years to be able to, in the new business process, I interview the brand and I
Yeah.
ask them, do you have a robust brand marketing strategy, PR strategy, social strategy? All of this needs to be in place before we get started.
Right.
So I think that was the first big shift of recognizing that in order for you to do your best work, and again, it's tricky because of course, like you can't go out and be that picky off the bat. You do have to
Totally.
like,
Totally.
and I was offering like very deep dish discounted rates and
Yes.
retainers for like the
Yes.
early stages. So
Yes.
there's a lot of like, piecing it together at the beginning.
Of
But I
course.
think recognizing that taking on a client that's not ready or aligned with you can
Yeah.
actually do more damage to your morale, your team's
Mhm.
morale, the quality of your work. You're not going to produce the same quality
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So that was really tricky. But also recognizing the importance of, I used every single time we would lose a client, I would take it deeply personal. Like I
Mm.
would be absolutely gutted.
Right.
And I kind of started to realize the importance of asking for feedback
Mhm.
and recognizing it. And what I was really proud is that over the years, okay, this is an early stage startup who has a very short runway and they're running out of money
Mhm.
and it's a financial decision.
Right.
Or this is a company that, we've worked with for 3.5 years. We
Mhm.
built the foundation of their program.
Yeah.
And we've done such a great job. They're hiring an in-house team of 4 people. That's not a failure for us. That's
Right.
actually a success. And
Right.
so starting to really recognize, and even to this year, get to the point where I can identify, you know, one of the clients, for example, that we had been worked with for about 6 months, I said, I actually think this will be more efficient for you to hire someone in-house sitting
Mm.
right next to the founder,
Mm.
because there's so much intricacies to the service they offered that we
Right.
ended up being sort of this like messenger back and forth. And I
Right.
said, this isn't productive to have an agency. So let me help you hire. And I put
Yeah.
together a JD and recommended some individuals
Wow.
for them to hire in-house. So it took some time to get over that like emotion of, oh my gosh, either we're dropping a client or they're dropping us. But I can say in all the years, what was always paramount to me is maintaining Dialogue's reputation
Mm.
and ensuring that even if we part ways for whatever reason, people will say great things about Dialogue and working with
Mhm.
us. And that's what's most important.
Yeah.
So I think it's a journey, but
Right.
getting to a point where you don't see that as a failure and see
Yeah.
it as actually sometimes an opportunity, because it frees you up to work with a better
Yeah.
client that's more aligned.
Right. And I like that you mentioned the importance of actually, again, of course, there's nuance to the beginning days of when you need the revenue
Yeah.
and you're a 20-some-year-old in New York
Yeah.
City and you need that money to pay rent. But at the same time, I agree. Like I think as you develop more, and I have my own social media branding agency as well.
Mhm.
And that was something I experienced in recognizing that it's not great to take on clients that are not aligned,
Yeah.
especially, let's say, maybe it's financial reasons, they're just not at a revenue point yet that
Yeah.
they should be taking on someone like
Right.
you. And it's similar as you said, right? Initially it's like you take it personally, as most of us will probably
Mhm.
experience in the early days, but you recognize the importance of alignment. But something that I saw a parallel to is in dating, right?
Mm.
Similar to when you are going on initial dates. I know you're not in the dating scene anymore, but right, I'm sure you hear the stories with girlfriends in New York. And
Yeah.
when you meet someone that is just not aligned with you, and to carry that on,
You can feel it.
yes,
Yeah.
right. And so it was kind of a fascinating aha moment to see when I had a very aligned client, it felt like this. And same
Mhm.
with dating,
For
right?
sure.
When you meet someone and it's actually a genuine alignment
Mhm.
of everything across the board, from just natural chemistry to compatibility on vision or whatever,
Yes.
you feel it like this.
And I feel like with dating, like as much as I think there is an intuition to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big believer. Like I've been with my husband 10 years and we've been married 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
And we've put so much work and like commitment into making our relationship work. It's not, I think there used to be these like fairy tale stories of like finding your soulmate's perfect. And all the couples that I admire, that I recognize, they're really committed to working on each other on themselves for the other. And so there's certainly a lot of, commitment and work that goes into it. But I do think from the get-go, there's that intuition. Similar with a client, similar with anything. And we often like ignore it. But I had that intuition on the first date with my husband. And it, you just know it. And so, and again, it's not like soulmates and whatever. Like, trust me, we've gone through the works and ups and downs. But I do think like similarly with a client, when you can feel that mutual respect and, admiration, you can't ignore that. And likewise the opposite.
And it's great timing too, because I wanted to transition into, your relationship, something that honestly from that coffee conversation, I was like, wow, there's a lot of great nuggets here for young women to understand. And like you said, there is a lot of work that is put into any awesome relationship. But I think just starting from the intuition part, something I definitely have noticed as a pattern is a lot of people that I look up to, especially in their romantic relationships, more often than not, usually like 90% of the time, they've always said something along the lines of like they knew very much in the beginning. And again, in books, we might see it as like, oh, a romantic fairy tale, or that's Hollywood. But to me, that was like, that's an interesting pattern I've noticed. Like a lot of people actually, to some degree, knew. And I was like, just lit up by hearing you share like what you showed me that picture that you wrote on the bathroom, It was like so cool. I was like, wow, like, and you were younger too. You were like 23.
23 when I met.
And you shared that story of, him like coming to your birthday and like him making that comment to his friends. So I'm like, wow, it is fascinating to me that it does work both ways. And again, I think I always heard that as well and took that into account. And of course wanted that for myself and noticed the differences when I did notice something like that. But hearing that in real time is also very like, okay, like, that's a thing. But can you share a little bit about just kind of your thought process on intuition and maybe times, maybe it's observing friends that you saw were questioning it in the beginning and you also just knew for them like this was not it type of thing?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I can't describe it anything more than an intuition. Like I came home from our first date and I was living with a roommate at the time and I came home to her, I was like, oh, I'm marrying this guy 1000%.
That's so crazy.
He came to my birthday a week later with a couple of his friends with all these like presents. He had just met me and his buddy was like, ooh, that's a little much, dude. Like and he was like, oh, I'm gonna marry this girl. So it's hilarious because he would kill me for even saying that. Like Rob's the opposite of that. He's not at all like gushy romantic.
Totally.
So we both had this like intuition, but does that mean everything is like fairy tale and perfect? Absolutely not. There were times where we lived apart. He had moved back to Paris. I was still in New York. We did long distance for a while. We've gone through pandemics together. We've gone through parenting together. We've had a child together. Like there's a lot of difficulties and challenges along the way. But I do think that intuition generally is there at the early, and also in the flip side, friends of mine that have been divorced or have broken up with people that they've been with long term, they too have that gut intuition. So it's really easy to ignore it. Either being cynical and ignoring, the fairy tale story or ignoring the like red flag that's in your mind. But I think, it's important to just, not that it needs to feel perfect. And it just, honestly, I think the key to it, like I said, is two people committed to working on themselves in a marriage, in a relationship, in a partnership. As long as you're open to being self-aware, learning about yourself, like learning how you can be, more understanding or like adapt yourself to be a better person for the couple. That to me is what I see as like a great long-term success. I think it's when people are just stuck in their ways and saying, well, he's the way he is, he'll never change, or she's the way she is. That's where it starts to get tricky because you also grow a lot in 11 years and you change.
And that makes me fascinated too, I think being in a city like New York where casual dating, fun dating is very prominent, how did you manage, or both of you, because you guys were on the younger side for New York, and so I think that's really cool is that you met someone, ended up dating that person long term, and then also in those years you started dialogue and you were kind of in the building process of your life and your career. How did that look like with having a relationship? Because I think sometimes people go, oh, maybe I should wait until I'm at a certain stage in life to then accept something like that, right? And of course, I think sometimes people will look back and be like, wow, I shouldn't have passed up that opportunity when I met someone, all because of this belief, like I should wait until I'm this age or after I've done this in my career. And I'm sure you've seen that or heard that through, you know, friends and mutual friends. But what was that like for you? And of course your husband as well. No, just like curious how for you and your husband meeting in your 20s, how did you guys kind of manage that in a way where like you're growing as individuals and in your relationship while living in a city like New York where going out with your girlfriends is really common and part of the lifestyle, right? I mean, 23 and I'm even, you know, I'm 26 now and I think like I love going out with my girlfriends too. And I know that's something you shared in the past, like that's a priority of yours is having girlfriend time. But how did you, I hate the word balance sometimes because that's not realistic, you know, but like how did you manage that lifestyle living in a city like New York and then eventually like building a company?
Yeah, I mean, I think one big piece of advice I got from a mentor in my 20s, Rob's career was growing quickly. My career was growing quickly. And I had this story in my head of I want this dream power couple, you know, and like, I'm so excited to be like, you know, to have this equal and a partnership. And that was so crucial and important to me. And my mentor at the time was like 10 years older. And he was like, Julianne, that's great, but you're in this for the long run.
Yeah.
And having that power couple, like, think about how my husband's name is Robinson. Like, how's Robinson going to be as a dad? How's he going to be as, you know, like your partner when you're in your 80s? And I was like, oh, please, like, whatever. That's so like all that matters right now is that we're hustling, grinding, we're growing together. He was launching his consultancy. I was launching mine. We were just like this power duo.
Right.
And it could not be more accurate. Like, whether you commit to this person in a marriage or a partnership, like ultimately you're wanting to build a life with this individual and you're going to grow and your life and your priorities are going to shift and change. And I can say that entering our new phase with a year and a half daughter, Rob's like the most incredible dad. And our values are so aligned in terms of our family. And so I think it's really important to look at someone, not just of like a piece of paper, check the box of what is shiny and exciting in a partner in your 20s, but really think like about your values and what matters most to you. And as hard as it is to think of your 30s, your 40s, your 50s and onward, just seeing this as like a holistic relationship and all the values it can bring. And then I also just think that it's so crucial to find someone that like will support you. And it's so corny to say that, but like Rob is the ultimate feminist. Like my success makes him most proud. And he never once has ever like felt threatened by having a wife who is an entrepreneur. He's always supported me in my endeavors. And I think like that you can identify really early on in a relationship. And it's so crucial if it is something that, you know, you're pursuing your dreams, that you both are, you know, there for one another. And in my case, I was very lucky that we kind of just like have not followed traditional like gender norms of like what a man and a woman and all that story. We just sort of have followed our own dreams. And it's led to just, you know, the most supportive partner in my life. But I think again, you can identify that really early on in seeing how someone is supporting your little dreams. Because dialogue was just a small seed of an idea, you know, when I was 27. So.
How was it when you were building that? Because I'm sure you were also allocating a lot of time to focus on growing that. And I know you mentioned that he was also starting his own consulting business at the time too. But what did that like? Did you guys ever have to have a conversation of, hey, you know, we're going to at this chapter prioritize the relationship a little bit less in any way because we're building? Or and I don't want to say less like in a negative way, but just acknowledging that, hey, we're both, you know, 27 and 30 and we see a future for ourselves together. We see us building a family. We're going to do this now so that we can have that life for our family. Was that a conversation you guys ever had to have? Or did you feel like the speed was the same even when you were, you know, building up the companies?
I feel like being really clear on what your priorities are and what is most important to you is really vital. Because again, like I look at a lot of my friends who have started, you know, pre-seed startups, and they do have to absolutely burn the midnight oil and you know, work their ass off. But I really am always so careful to subscribe to this hustle and grind narrative of New York. I grew up with it. My career, you know, developed in this, like, you have to show face. You have to be at work till, you know, 9 p.m. You have to be the first thing out. Like all of this like narrative, working on weekends, always available. It's only gotten exponentially worse with like, you know, Slack and, you know, just 24/7 social media and whatnot. But Rob and I, when we were building our careers, or when I was starting Dialogue, it was never this notion of like, we're stopping everything else in our life and doing this. It was very important to us that we had a balance. So we've always, every summer we go to France to spend time with his family in the south of France. And it was really important that when crafting our dreams and our goals, we preserved that freedom of travel and being able to work anywhere, everywhere. That we, you know, really prioritized other passions of ours outside of work. So we really love film and art and fashion and decor and all of these aspects that make us happy humans beyond our work. We really ensured that those were preserved. So I think it's really important. Sometimes it can feel like entrepreneurship is this all or nothing, but I don't think it has to be. I think you can find a way to be successful, grow a company, you know, achieve all of your goals, but also have a life outside of it. And so that was like our value set that we agreed upon early on, and preserved that together.
Yeah. And something that I really took from our last conversation too was how you shared that. I think one of the things was, now that you guys have a daughter together, that she is not the center of your universe, but that she's a part of your universe. And I think I shared that with a girlfriend too. Like later that week, I was like, guys, this is like so super cool. But can you share more about that philosophy? Because I do think that is so key. I think regardless if someone's listening right now and they are an entrepreneur or will be an entrepreneur and a mom at the same time. I like that aspect of like, oh wow, like, because you said, you know, you bring her when you travel, and she's been on many flights,
36 flights.
Yeah, a lot of flights. And I think, I'm thinking, wow, like, I feel like my parents would judge me for that. I'm sure there's a good chunk of society that would judge me for that. And that's why I was like, I like that you, what's it called? Like you do life to the beat of your own drum. And again, having that kind of fundamental view of she's a part of our universe. She's not the center of it.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, man, this world of parenting has really blown open so many doors for me. But I think what's so vital, there's so much judgment and preaching when it comes to motherhood or parenting. And I think what's so vital is like, I'm not going to sit here and say it should be done this way. It's so personal. And as long as you are, you know, loving your child, supporting them in their exploration, providing a predictable environment, I think there's like 3 main things that really like, you know, help a child flourish. Whatever, you know, strategies or approach or decisions you make is what's best for you and your family. And so I've just say that, you know, with a caveat, because the amount of stories that were put on me when I was pregnant, it's going to be like this. You're never going to travel again. You're never going to work out again. Your company's going to, like, you'll never have a work ethic. You're not going to have your ambition, yada, yada, yada. All these horrible things that people will say, like, this is the way it's going to be. So I think it's so important to recognize you have your own experience. Our experience, we bring in our cultures. My husband's French, I'm from Canada. And I think a lot of French society actually pushes this narrative and believes in this narrative that there's kind of 2 philosophies where your child is the center of your universe, which is a beautiful notion. We kind of subscribe to the idea that Navy's not the center of our universe. And that usually gets like, like a gasp. Like, how could you say that? But she is part of our universe. And she's the most important part of our universe. Like, she is, you know, the most important element in my life. But we have her just part of what we do. So like you said, we travel quite a bit. She's been on 36 flights in a year and a half, and we bring her with us. And it's not always, it's not easy. It's not like, it's not always like sunshine and butterflies, but that's something that's important to us in our lifestyle. And so she's part of that. We are, we really are into food and I'm really into cooking. And so she's been my sous chef since she's like a month old, where she like smells the basil or like she plays, cutting and pretending and whatnot. And so I actually see that philosophy of making your child part of your universe, not the center of it, a gift to them, because you're exposing them now to all of your passions. You're maintaining your identity as a mom and like what makes you happy and fills you up.
Yeah.
And you're now expanding all of that like experience to your child, versus if you make them the center of the universe and you stop, your fitness or your travel or your passions or your social life or your friends, you're not, expanding your child's like universe in that sense.
Right. So. How did you deal, if you did deal with it in regards to, let's say, like family or close friends that maybe would try to input their opinion too much on like, hey, like you shouldn't be taking her on that many flights type of thing. You know what I mean? And I'm actually curious just for myself, because I know that I've always been the type of individual that done things my own way. And that being said, right, there's always a lot of resistance to that, whether it's friends talking about it with one another or sharing their opinion to you, thinking they're trying to be a good friend, of course, but maybe overly sharing that opinion, or of course the parents, right? I know mine would be like, what are you doing? Like, you are not a 20-some-year-old in New York anymore. You are a mother, and I'm just like, and so when I hear a realistic approach of someone that's doing the thing, I'm like, well, here's an example. And I think that's the same thing with entrepreneurs. It's like, well, she's done it, so I can too, right? So how like that ripple effect of like seeing someone else do it helps you think, oh, I can do that as well, or that it's possible at the very least.
The comments are always there. I think my parents are in Canada. I had a more traditional, like, like lifestyle. They both worked in government. It was, we didn't travel extensively growing up. So there's like questions of like, what? Like, even when I told my parents we're going to live between New York and Paris, we're going to have a partner or apartment in Brooklyn, we're going to have one in Montmartre, and we're going to go back and forth. They're like, what? But I think that's okay. And likewise, when we speak about our parenting style, you'll have friends that are like, whoa, like that wouldn't work for me.
Right.
But as long as people will be surprised and people will have opinions, but as long as they respect it, and there's a big difference. So like, my parents will be like, how does that work? But they're not going to judge me for it. They'll be like, okay, like, you go, you do you. Or I'll have friends that'll be like, wow, I would never take my child out to a restaurant. We take Navy to our like neighborhood restaurant every single Sunday.
Yeah.
And the first couple of weeks, like we have a little family like lunch basically. And the first couple of times I took her, she was like throwing food, everyone's screaming, and we're like, oh my God, like this is so embarrassing. And then after a couple of weeks, she started to acclimate and get used to it. And now she'll sit without a phone, without any social media, like just chilling, eating her French fries and like relaxing for a full hour.
Wow, that's so
and
cool.
So, but you'll have friends that are like, I would never take my child to a restaurant.
Right.
Like, how it's fine, each to their own, and you'll have those like comments, but as long as people are just respectful for like, I don't agree with some of the techniques that I know other, parents use, but I don't judge them for it. That works for them.
Totally.
This works for us.
Totally.
So.
Yeah, and something else that I like that you've done too is the structure that you shared with me on how like you actually are very mindful of how you allocate time with her in the morning, and then during like work hours you're here, and then after, I don't know, I think it was like 4 p.m. or something, that like you are home, you and your husband are spending time with her. Since you enjoy cooking and you love her being a part of that, like you have that moment with her. Can you share how you've been able to kind of like narrow that structure down, and also I think like have that vision of shared values? I think you had shared that you have it on your fridge or something like that. And it's just like, wow, it's like, again, some people might think, oh wow, that's so structured, but I think there's there's a secret of success there of like, these are some of the things we've learned down the road, and now we implement certain things to help continue that.
I think the structure is something crucial for us, at least. Like at the beginning we were like, we're just gonna wing it, like we don't need support, like we don't need help, like we're just gonna wing it. We're like, we have flexible schedules, and then you just like absolutely drown in it. And I think someone described it to me where it's like, when you have a child, your pie of whether it's like social life, work, your personal, time for hair and nails and working out, your personal time, your relationship, before you had this nicely balanced circle.
Yes.
Your child comes in and takes maybe like 70% of like that. with pleasure.
Right.
But it now means that you need to be so thoughtful with what you do in that 30% of your like your time.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if work is a huge priority as an entrepreneur, it's getting help, finding great people that can support, whether it's your parents or a nanny or a daycare,
right,
to allow that structured time. So it really helped me to say, okay, we wake up with Navy. I'm like present. We have breakfast together. We get ready together. We have that time from like, 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning. Then at 8:30, I switched to work mode. And from 8:30 to like 3:30 or 4, I'm in work mode. I'm focused on my clients and meetings. And it allows me just the freedom to not try and spread myself too thin.
Yeah.
And then when I come home, phone is like plugged in, airplane mode. I'm cooking dinner. I'm with my daughter and I'm present. And I think having that structure before, when you're like, oh, I can wing it. I can take calls while she's napping in the house. Trust me, I tried. Did not work for me. I have to have that like very clear. And my husband too, like we identified what was important to him, what he needed to preserve for his individual time. And before we had Navy, we actually talked about what are like our non-negotiables that make us who we are.
Yes.
And Rob was like, he works out like 2 to 2.5 hours every day. Like, and he's like, if I don't do that, I will lose myself. And I said, if I don't have a social life where I can connect with my girlfriends and really just like find time to, I'm such an extrovert in that sense, I'll lose myself. So those were our non-negotiables.
Okay.
And we schedule our lives around ensuring that we have that space. So I think
that's awesome.
It's, really important you can't necessarily do it all. I think that's sort of like a strange narrative, but you can just be more thoughtful in the shift of your, time that you have now, how to prioritize what makes you feel most like yourself, yourself, your relationship, whether it's like having a babysitter and going out and doing the things you love to do with your partner. And I think the biggest learning isn't necessarily about structure, but it's just about like trying to like wing it in parenting. Every time we try to wing it, it blows up in our face. So.
And what I like about it though too is because I think my natural instinct would be, oh, like let's probably wing this. I mean, we'll figure it out as we go. But I think from when I hear you share that, to me, it's almost like having this vision that guides you in a more clear direction versus when you're winging it, you're kind of like all over the place and not going specifically in a direction that's I think helpful for everyone as a team and as a unit. And so I think that's what's fascinating is like hearing that. I honestly I've never heard anyone share that, and I'm sure, I don't know, 5-8 years from now, like when I'm in that stage of life where I may be a mom, like I think that's something I'm going to remember. But that's the thing, it's like I think sometimes we don't really have the opportunity to hear these like, oh, like these nuanced ideas of like this is actually a potential way for me to approach it myself,
and I think it's such a scary thing. Like I was petrified when I was pregnant of like, I'm gonna lose myself, I'm gonna lose my company, I'm gonna lose my friendships, I'm gonna lose my travel, I'm gonna lose my adventure. And it was really crippling. And I think it's just a matter of knowing it's not this narrative you can have it all, but you can still maintain what you love and what's important to you. And it's just about being more thoughtful with your time. And honestly, the like scheduling and ensuring that you carve out time for my morning workouts. I carve out time, for a manicure once a week. I carve out time to see my girlfriends. I carve out time to, call my parents, like having that, and asking for what you need and for your partner also. And just being a little bit more like thoughtful with it just ensures that you have that balance, because it can, tip really quickly if you're not structuring it.
Final few questions. I think this one's gonna be really fun. Like one thing you would share with your younger self, let's say when you were 25, in business, career, and then also relationships. And I would separate relationships with romantic as well as girlfriends, because this is a very predominantly young female audience that they're in that first few years out of post-grad and they're dealing with all three, and all of them are hitting at once, right? Girlfriend drama, dating sucks in New York or LA or wherever they are, and figuring out their career path and hitting that wall.
Oh my God. That's great. So 25-year-old me, let me think. From a career perspective, it's interesting. I think what I would have told myself is you have no idea what potential is out there and what potential you have. So I kind of would would say, okay, if I can get 3 clients as a consultant, that is success. And that's it. I made it. And working with Ben, he would always like open up and unlock the next level. So he'd be like, well, what would it look like if you quadrupled your revenue or you hit like, you know, a 7-figure revenue goal? And I was never, are you kidding me? No.
Right.
And then you achieve it. And then even now, still to this day, I'm thinking, no, we've hit success. Like we have a really successful company. I don't think we've even scratched the surface.
Wow.
And so I think it's really important just to like not limit yourself in what, because I see a lot of friends like I'm, you know, in early 30s now where a lot of my girlfriends are extremely successful in their careers. They have made it. Like we're talking really great salaries and great roles and great titles.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have just like, so what? I made it. Like I achieved the VP level or I've hit this like, you know, salary goal. And if you limit yourself to just that's the end goal, then there's just so much more beyond that. So I would think just like continue to challenge your notion of what's possible and where you can go next. But, you know, don't get too stuck in just one end goal in life because I think like, you know, it just keeps evolving. So, and in terms of friendships, I think as I got older and also traveling, my time got limited of being able to like, you know, when I was back in New York, I only had to say like a week to catch up with friends. And I think it's just about prioritizing, I mean, so like cliche, but just prioritizing people that make you feel amazing. Cause I think there's often times where you have these people in your life that you've been friends with them for so long, but they drain you. They don't support you. They don't bring anything to your life. And I think as I noticed like a shift in my 30s of just not putting up with the bullshit and just really wanting to have people surround me that love me and support me, not this competitiveness or tearing down. Like I really can say that like we just don't have that energy in our life, my husband and I, in terms of our friendships. And Rob had when we moved back to New York 2 years ago, he was very adamant on the notion of like we run our own race. We're not going to pretend to be something we're not. We're not going to be around people that are inauthentic and trying to be, you know, showcasing through XYZ. We're going to be around people that are authentically themselves, good, bad, and the ugly, and just are genuine. And I think having those type of people in your life is just the most important. And relationships, I think it's like when you're contemplating committing to someone in your life, the biggest question is like, is this person willing to work on themselves? And am I willing to work on myself?
Wow.
And the amount of times of failed partnerships I've seen, it's because the person just they're not self-aware. They won't work on their, you know, past trauma, their experiences.
Wow.
And I think everybody has to continue that like development of, you know, whether it be through therapy, whether it be just through reading, whatever form, to just understand your limitations and commit to that work together is what makes it work. So I think as long as you can see that your partner is in it to like really try and improve themselves and grow as an individual, because you can't change someone. You'll never be able to change that person. They have to change themselves. So I think that's just, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect on paper and check all the boxes, but you just have to feel that they're willing to work and change for you and vice versa. For it to work.
Wow. Oh, that's profound, especially because I noticed that you said that earlier too, the self-awareness and understanding and desire to grow as an individual for also a bigger things such as the relationship and obviously for oneself. But no, I love that just because I'm very into personal growth. This podcast is too. And so something I take into consideration for things that I observe in my own relationship, as well as things that I see in close friends that are saying like, hey, I'm not sure, you know, and I think these are good nuggets to pass along to the next generation. You know?
And I think like oftentimes, you know, I had a really nice upbringing and wonderful supportive parents. You think, oh, I don't have anything to work on. I'm good. And the amount of like from our couples therapy that it really just made me realize like, wow, like there's so much that I can be self-aware. And it doesn't mean that just because you didn't have necessarily like a traumatic upbringing that you don't have work to do on yourself.
Right.
So I think it's just being open to like the baggage and the experiences and the insecurities and the like all of this that you bring to the table in your 20s. All of that affects how you enter a relationship, and just being open to like hearing and learning about it, whether or not it's like, you know, a traditional sense of, self-awareness, or if it's just being curious about yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Ooh, I love that. Last two, any book recommendations?
oh my goodness.
Can be business,
I'm reading an
life.
outstanding one. It's in my purse right now.
Okay.
So I will tell you it. And
okay,
and
well,
we
we'll
can put
definitely
it
share
in
on
there.
the story.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything from the past that just sticks out to you that maybe business, life, personal development, or fiction even?
Oh, book-wise.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
book.
I really liked Atomic Habits.
Okay. Yeah. James
That
Clear's a great
was
one.
really fantastic. It's killing me. The book I'm reading last night, I just started. It's called Almost the Same, I think.
Okay.
And it's just a notion on how much in life we try to forecast, whether it be finances and investments or planning your business and like strategically planning for growth.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of life is unexpected. And you think of like, he gave the example of the economist who wrote predictions for 2020, 2021. They did not predict the pandemic. They did not predict the war of, between Russia and Ukraine. They didn't predict all these elements. And those have the biggest impact on our society and life. And so as an entrepreneur, you can have all the what ifs like planned out, but there always are going to be the uncertainty.
That's so true.
That really impact it. And also, he had a really interesting element around your happiness is actually a notion of your expectations and reality and the gap between it. And so he gave the example of how in the 50s that was the era where people were most satisfied with their life, and it's because there wasn't this huge disparity of difference, but everyone in middle class kind of had their bungalows and their Chevrolets, and they went camping for their holidays. And now in the world of social media, there's huge disparity of people on private jets or traveling around the world, and you can compare yourself and you shift your expectations to it, whereas you don't realize you're really perfectly happy in what you have in front of you. So that book was outstanding. I'll triple check the title and tell you, but we have a book club at Dialogue. So my team each month we read a different book. And yeah, those have been two that really stood out to me.
Love that. Love that. Last question, and something I ask every guest on the show, but in reflection of everything, you've building Dialogue and your relationship with your husband and your daughter and everything you've experienced in life, what would you say truly fulfills you in life?
I think it's something that I've been kind of conscious of. I listened to a podcast from a professor of happiness at Harvard.
What's do you remember his name by chance?
I will send you that to my memories.
I might have been listening to him before too.
It's fantastic. And it was actually a Tim Ferriss interview. So I can
is it Arthur C. Brooks by
probably
chance? Yes.
Wasn't that amazing?
Yes. So amazing. I sent that to my
good.
boyfriend. I was like, because he listens to Tim as well. And I'm like, you're gonna love this episode.
And it's a long one, but I listened to it over 4 or 5 days. But he really had something that clicked with me, and it was his anti-bucket list. Did you hear that part?
It's so we just were talking about this earlier today. Like, yes, the reverse bucket list type of thing. Yes.
And so I'm very ambitious. I have all these goals. I just mentioned in this interview how important it is to dream big and like not limit yourself. But what's so important is to like write them out, have the vision board, like really approach it, but cross them off, because at the end of the day, yes, I would love to grow Dialogue even more, and I would love to achieve XYZ, but I am so, so happy and grateful for my life today, for how fortunate, I am with my to have my husband and my daughter in good health and happiness in a community that surrounds us. And it can get so easy to focus on more going up the ladder, and you actually realize it's always in like retrospect how happy you are in the moment. And so when I think about fulfillment, every night I'm just trying to and oftentimes I've always been a big proponent of like gratitude journals, but it sometimes just felt like I was like filling out a form, whereas like every night I just try and like close my eyes and think of all that I have to be grateful for, and it gives me such fulfillment, because you realize you don't need all the other stuff is gravy. It's like amazing to dream big and have more and whatnot, but what you have today is enough. And so I think that really gives me a lot of fulfillment.
Wow. Oh, that's I love that. And it's so ironic that my partner and we were talking about reverse bucket list earlier this morning, and he was reflecting on just like his success in business lately, but also recognizing that he's accomplished everything he once wanted on his vision board and his little checklist, and realizing like I've done these things, and so it's finding that sweet spot, like you said, between wanting to achieve more and wanting to be able to do awesome things in life, but also recognizing like I've done a lot and I'm really grateful and fulfilled to just be where I'm at right now.
And just being aware of how the goalposts shift.
Yes.
Like I remember I was thinking of applying to a green card as a Canadian 5 years ago. And as part of it, you need to have press. You have to be in the press. And I was like, never in a million years
for the US
would I. Yeah.
Oh wow.
You have to demonstrate, especially as an entrepreneur, that you have notoriety and whatnot.
Yeah.
And at the time I had zero press and I was like, never. And I think it was on a vision board. And then now I've been fortunate enough to be interviewed and have great press.
Yeah.
And it's always like, well, I want the next level of press. And so you don't realize that like 5 years ago, that Julianne would be so proud of what I've accomplished. But now I'm like, what's next? So you really have to be aware of like, and try and just think of like, you know, how far you've come and at the end of the day, all that matters is like your relationships and your like the people around you.
Yeah.
And you can have all the like, you know, money or experiences or luxury in the world, but if you don't have like the people to like enjoy it with, means nothing. So that really resonated. I can't believe that's
wow.
So interesting.
That's so awesome. Well, Julianne, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing everything with the audience. Where can everyone find you? Learn more about Dialogue, share your social media handles or wherever you want them to find
you. So I'm Julianne Fraser on Instagram. Definitely people can reach out and say hi and whatnot. Dialogue is Dialogue NYC on Instagram, and our website's Dialogue NYC as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.